I'd like to call the January the 11th study session for the City Council to order, please. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Very good. Next up is clarification items. Councilmember Daigle.
None.
Councilmember Curry.
No items?
I have none.
Councilmember Hill.
I have none.
And Councilmember Rosansky.
No, thank you.
And Councilmember Gardner.
None.
And I have one. Item number 7, which has to do with the potential widening of Newport Boulevard. I just would like to work with staff in formulating the specifics of that application as they're getting at it. And that would be fine. And with that, then, let's move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the Lido Village conceptual plan.
Mayor Henn, members of the council, good afternoon. I'm Tim Collins, and I'm happy to be back with what I hope is maybe not so new, but an improved set of concept plans for the redevelopment of Lido Village. Since we were
Tim,
here,
let me just interrupt for 1 second here. The general course of what's to happen here is that we'll see the presentation, and then we will ask for comments from the major stakeholders, including the Marshall Properties Group, and then public comment. And for those sections, I would encourage council members to ask questions and clarifications, but that I would like to reserve policy and concept discussion then until after public comment is over. I am hopeful that we can shoot for around a 5:30 wrap-up on this agenda item, but we'll do what we need to do. We do have a full session for closed session today. Thanks, Tim. Sorry to interrupt.
not at all, thank you. We intend that our prepared remarks will take no more than 40 minutes, so that should be accomplished with plenty of public comment.
If they took 30 minutes, that would be fine.
All right. Since November 23rd, when we addressed the council and presented at that time 4 concepts, we have regrouped. We have taken both the public comment as well as council's, and our time in the last nearly 2 months has been spent reaching out and conferring with council members to give them more background. For example, we had an opportunity to meet with new Councilman Hill to share with the process that had occurred earlier in the year prior to his being elected, and to give him all the necessary data that had been gathered. As you know, there was a lot that had been shared along the way prior to November 23rd even. To set the table and to give a context for this afternoon's presentation, I think it's important to know that we will minimize our review of everything we brought on November 23rd. Reasons for that are really twofold. There was a lot that you weren't interested in, and there is also some new information that we have gathered, primarily related to data that you wanted more specificity about, such as parking inventory and the exploration of alternative use concepts, alternative land use for the City Hall site. I remind the audience and those present tonight that our concentration is on the reuse of the City Hall site. This is not our final report on the comprehensive village. We will of necessity make reference to the adjacencies, and we will, I'm sure, touch upon what is going on other than the City Hall site, particularly as it relates to the edge conditions. Of the 4 alternatives that you reviewed on November the 23rd, we abandoned option number 1. It was really of no interest to anyone. We then took alternatives 2, 3, and 4. We lifted the features and aspects of each that seemed to have some traction, but I would say what has evolved and will be presented tonight in the alternatives, again, as known as 5A and 5B, are largely an improvement and expansion of alternative 4 that was presented prior to the Thanksgiving holiday. We have sought to be less constrained by the status quo and the technical approach that we did little too much of in our earlier assessment of the opportunities. We have used maximum use of images and framework, and in so doing, we have worked with the major property owners who had not partaken fully prior to November, and we have engaged them. We have asked them to revisit their respective plans and opportunities, and I'm very happy to report that they have demonstrated a willingness to do so. They have shown a flexibility. They have raised their issues loudly, clearly, and I hope you will hear from some of them later on this evening as we have encouraged them to make their own remarks. At this point, then, I'd like to commence just walking through the PowerPoint presentation of which you received an advance copy, quickly touching upon the guiding principles. I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit. As the mayor alluded to, our presentation tonight will follow the agenda which is before you. There are two primary options that we need to provide time for comments, and there's also new and updated data on the economics, the market opportunity, and the fiscal analysis that supports each of the two alternatives and is contrasted in part with the status quo, the existing Lido Village as configured today. Now, looking at the guiding principles, as you know, this set of principles was adopted early on by the stakeholders, and when we embarked on this project, we decided that we had to have a framework against which to test our progress and test each of the concepts that evolved. Those that have been shared with you previously are in the low case, if you will, the basic color. The contrasts in blue and the brighter yellow are things that have been added along the way, primarily, again, as the result of specific direction from the stakeholders or in consideration of public comment. Next slide, please, Todd. The important messages that we took away from the 23rd presentation, I won't read them all. They're here in bullet form for you, but a few of them I'd like to speak to. Of course, you were disappointed with the plans and the lack of a sense of place and cohesion. You observed a lack of imagination as it related to some of the basic concepts presented. I think the most salient comment from the public was the need for a hook. Take that to be the anchor, the principal use of the site, and we believe that we have addressed that in spades. And finally, I think your direction for us to reach out to another level of stakeholders, if you will, the second tier of landowners, was something that took us a fair amount of time and was successful to get us to where we are tonight. Looking at definitional issues that were a source of some confusion amongst the council and the public alike, we've listed here again the terms that we threw around a little carelessly in November to try and give everyone what we meant by what we said. And we'll reach back to these a little later on this evening, but each one of these has a distinct purpose, and they have been considered fully in the programmatic options for the public use, as we're now calling it, the Community Services Center, and we'll talk about that in a minute when Todd gets into the plans. The direction that we would like to find tonight is really fourfold, if not five. First, we would like to have council advise us as to whether we are moving in a direction that you believe is where you want to go. Obviously, we have distilled 4 options down to 2, and that said, we think we're evolving, and we think we have the best of all options. We need more direction on the programmatic options for the public uses or the public benefit options that we have identified, and we need to have the recognition of the other stakeholders, the adjacent property owners, whom we have asked and whom we have expected to sacrifice some particular aspect of their planned property reuse. For example, one of the property owners had done some substantive layout of a housing product on their land. You'll hear about this in more detail. And then when we interjected the notion of the canal system, we took a significant part of that productive housing area away. In return for that, the property owner is saying, okay, if it's for the greater use, we will participate, we will consider giving up, but we're going to ask for some added densities, some added bonus entitlement to make up for what we're giving for the public benefit. And in that regard, we would ask the council give us some early guidance as to whether we're going in the right direction and as to whether the give and the get have a fairness and an equity and a balance to them. We will ask for some direction on deliverables as to what you want to see in 2 weeks when we plan to come back with the entire village plan refined. For example, you're seeing tonight for the first time some vertical representations of the possibilities of the options, and it may be that you'll want more of that or you'll want it addressed from different perspectives. That's the type of input that we need from council this evening. And then I guess lastly, not in the slide, but something that the team has discussed in the last few days is that we will need to start thinking about the game plan for the entitlement process as we evolve. Had conversation with Mr. Campbell about this, and it's not too early for staff to be thinking about how these concept plans can move towards an implementation direction and to allow for phased execution. At this juncture, I'd like to introduce Todd Larner from William Hismalhawk Architects, who will walk you through the revised concepts.
Good afternoon, Mayor Henn, council members, city staff, and I'm excited to see all the residents here and people who are interested. It's always exciting to get people interested in what's going on in their city and also what we have here. As Tim mentioned before, we heard people loud and clear on the last meeting and that the plan lacked a lot of imagination. And this is not what we intended in that presentation, but we took that to heart in that we were focusing so much on the details, so much on the program, and so much on trying to make it work. It was constrained, and it wasn't artistic, and it wasn't a concept plan. That's the whole process of what we're going through here. It's a concept plan. It's an idea. So in taking this information, we went back to our office, and we sat down as a group and as a design team, and we really sat down and said, okay, what can we do here to really create a there? People mentioned that there needs to be a hook. There needs to be an anchor. And with that, we really started applying basic principles in creating frameworks. And the framework allows the landowners, the city hall, to come in and do a plug and play. By establishing a framework, what we're doing is allowing creativity. We're allowing a sense of place to be created. And that's the whole idea. And with the framework, there are certain components of that framework that help define what we want to do as a village. There's edges, there's circulation patterns, as well as nodes of activity. And I'm going to go into details on this. But all of these components allow a place to become a place and allow development to be flexible and evolve over time. So one of the basic building blocks of creating a sense of place is the edges and the edge condition. The edges help define where you're going to, where you're coming out of. There are different kinds of edges that are available here, especially on the village area. You've got streets defining edges. You have the waterway defining edges. But it helps announce a sense of place. And whether this is implemented through a landscape plan or a circulation plan, we'll go into that detail at another time. But it helps set the stage for it. The next component of the framework is circulation. People remember where they are and how they get there through circulation, whether it's through the car, through walking, through a bike. There are a bunch of different opportunities. And it encourages, what we really want to encourage is people going through and doing wayfinding in a project. And by establishing these frameworks of circulation, you're allowing people to do that. Another component that we're talking about in this is our nodes. And nodes are a technical term for people places. We've been talking about from the very beginning outdoor living room, defining places where people can go. And when you create these places, individuals, whether they're residents or visitors, take them unto themselves and they become their own. And they take on their own character. They take on their own feel based upon location, surroundings, architecture. Not too long ago, I guess, or a little while ago, the Goof Offers, I don't know if anybody remembers them, but they took over Richard's Market and the coffee shop there. And they created one of the first nodes besides McFadden's Landing in Newport Beach. They took it over and they made it their own. And that's what we want to intend here through the program uses, through the spaces, to create these nodes of interest where people can come and enjoy the area. And last, one of the most amazing things about landmarks is that they also help combine all these things in creating an identifiable sense of place. Whether it's a tower, whether it's a pedestrian bridge, whether it's at the circulation level or even at the pedestrian level, landmarks help identify places. If you come into Newport and you see the Lido Theater, you know you're in the Lido Theater. If you go to Catalina and see the casino, you know you're in Catalina or Avalon. It's an identifiable place. Now, whether it's the Lido Theater or elements, but it's an element of an architectural reference that can enhance the sense of place. So with that and all the elements going in there, we established these basic elements: edges, circulation, nodes, landmarks, in defining the place. And now as we start going back through and reapplying the technical aspect of what we did last time into a more creative thought process, this is where we're moving forward. And in building the story, we're going to talk about the overall area, but then focus more on the City Hall side as we go a little bit further into detail. One of the first proposals or ideas out there, this even before we started getting involved back in September, is that there is a need to address the odd configuration of City Hall and the Violito Partners piece. There's easements going over them. There's a really weird configuration with the lot line coming down here. And before we got involved, there was a notion to come in and square off the site. Now, we support this because in architecture and planning, square is better. Most buildings have square corners, square angles. It makes it a lot easier from a program standpoint. And if both parcels can benefit from a squared-up site, the potential for value in each of them goes up. You're able to increase density if you want to. You're able to be more efficient with the site. And if you're more efficient with the site, you'll be able to provide more public spaces if there is an opportunity for that. So this is one of the things that we came into when we first started the project, and we endorsed it. So this is
before
alternative.
you pass on that side, could you talk about the box there at the entrance?
Where? Right.
Yeah, the
Right
entrance
here?
box.
Right here is an existing easement right now with the Finley tract. And then there's also an easement overlay right here. This is not doing too well.
Yeah.
Can I borrow your mouse? Thanks, appreciate that. And there's also an easement running down here for truck access going to the market that's on top of the City Hall site. So no matter what would happen if the City Hall decided to sell their parcel or go, or square it off, you still have to deal with this right here and providing access to that site.
I'm talking about
Right there?
at the light there.
Yeah, the Finley access.
The Finley access is the same, is an easement as well going through there, allowing access to both sites. And Don Howard can speak a little bit more on that when he gets up to talk, but it's basically an easement that could service both sites.
All right, well, I guess we own, that's what, on the left is what's current, right? So we own
Correct.
that little white box there, and that's our property. We have title to the property, however, they have an easement for egress and egress.
Correct.
And so how are you suggesting that title will be held to the property on the right?
That's a detail I'm not privy to.
Okay, so we're like white-holing that, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not going to say we're going to whitehole it, but I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed later on, and I'm not up to speed on that right now as to exactly how it came about. But this is what we were presented when we first started doing the process a
Okay,
couple
so
months
the
ago.
title to that section of property is undetermined
Correct.
in the future plan?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Question for you, too, about that swap. It's difficult to tell for sure from your diagram, but would the city property would we lose frontage on Newport Boulevard with this swap?
Not really, no. I mean, it's
Okay.
pretty much the same lineal footage that would be along Newport Boulevard as exists today.
Okay.
Well, that's not exactly true, depending on who owns title to that property and how that's easement is constructed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Because my thinking was, it may be that the frontage along Newport Boulevard would have a greater value than back at the alley, and, how that would figure into things.
No, you're exactly right. It would be a higher value from a retail standpoint because you want the traffic along here to recognize that. But again, we're going to go into a little design concept here, and it's just the initial design concept, and that's really why we're here, to figure out if there's more options that we didn't explore. And I really like that you brought that up because we can test that out later on as well. Okay, with that, we started going back in and reestablishing another alternative. As Tim had mentioned, there were 4 alternatives beforehand. We took bits and pieces of each one, established a fifth, 5A and 5B, as we're going to be going through here. And it's really focusing on creating a sense of place. We embellished it with landscape. We embellished it with enhanced pedestrian areas. But one of the key components that we heard loud and clear is that we before had a parking lot down here. And what we heard from council members and the public, that they didn't want to see a whole sea of parking right here extend down to here. So the idea was to introduce a community facility down in here that what we're calling is the Community Service Center. And so if you look at the site right here, here's the City Hall site reconfigured based upon that slide before. We have a Community Service Center right here. We have some residential proposed right here. And the fire station is expanded in its use right here. Now, there's been a lot of talk about a canal or a waterway system going through the site. This is a representation or a concept idea that you would reserve the right-of-way coming through the site, through the top of it, and then connecting out all the way to the bay. We talked about from the very beginning, toes in the water, from the beach to the bay. And this is a concept that we're implementing right now as a placeholder. And that this design right here, in looking at it, represents water that's not connected to the bay, but would be a circulating water element that would have a canal feel. And I'm going to go into more detail on that as we go into the City Hall site itself. The other components that we introduced here that were incorporated through our discussions with the different stakeholders and different departments is the Violito Plaza or Violito Partners project right here has really been open to introducing pedestrian connectivity from this corner down here, from the plaza, going all the way through their site and going up and connecting to the Violito Marina or the Lido Village area up in here. Right now we're representing a second tier or second level sky bridge that would connect the sites to each other and potentially cross over. Now I say potentially cross over, there's a lot of things we need to figure out from a legal standpoint with air easements and all that, but the idea is to get people up, to get that second tier view, to get views of the ocean, to get distant views of the bay. And by doing so, you're mitigating the amount of cross traffic that people would interfere with as they walk from one place to another. The other proponent or concept that we introduced here would be a senior housing component with the City Hall. This would be a long-term ground lease, and Richard Gaulis with Concord Group is going to get into the financials on that. But the idea is it would be a long-term ground lease with the City Hall to help facilitate and satisfy some of the requirements per the general plan. Sorry, I'm jumping around here. Another component of the plan that we introduced was the improvement of the waterway along the Lido Marina parcel. And that in reconfiguring the docks, what we're allowing to do is allow distant views from the bulkhead and the boardwalk here down the main channel of the harbor. And with doing that, we're reconfiguring the docks to go further out into the bay right now. Again, this is a concept. We need to explore it a little bit more with harbor. Our last presentation on the 23rd was very eye-opening in the distance we can do docks out in the water. But the idea was that this is going to stay as it is right now. There's a lot of issues going on with the property and stabilizing it, and Vornado has mentioned that they want to upgrade the property and improve it, but they need to kind of hold off right now. But they are open to the idea of improving the boardwalk and maybe improving the dock configuration right here. Another portion that we've been talking about is what we call the Lido Triangle area, which is right in here, as well as the residential components across the street. Marshall Property owns the 5-story existing tower right now. We would incorporate that as the mixed use using their existing zoning that they're going for. But then below, talking to the Olin Corporation, they would really like to encourage or introduce, again, residential to this area, to add doors to it, as well as keep some of the commercial there as well, do a mixed-use project. Again, as the canal comes through the site, it cuts across the California Beach or the Blue Dolphin parcel right here that Marshall controls as well. And so in doing so, and in discussions with them, the idea was if they're going to be giving up the land, to provide them an opportunity to capture density, to make it economically feasible for them. And right now we're looking at doing some, we're in discussions of doing some mid-rise apartments in there, right, for discussion's sake right now, and that's what the density would be. The other component that we talked about that was received fairly well was talking about Lido, via Lido going down to Lido Island. The idea behind this one, you can't really see it, but the idea would be keeping the configuration of Via Lido pretty much the same as it is right here. But then as we get past Via Oporto, really necking it down and tapering it down, slowing down traffic, allowing it to become more of a residential street. Right now, you have a bunch of residents right here. You have a church right here, and a small retail or the real estate offices right here. But it would be to slow down the traffic and maybe encourage more parallel parking in here or even some nose-in parking and really slow this down. You would go down to 2 lanes of traffic, this is a concept, and still be able to maintain the traffic flows of people getting on to Via Lido or to Lido Island right now. That's just one of the concepts we want to do, to really slow it down and create a more residential feel for this neighborhood. So all the while we're doing this design work and going through it, we've been showing 2D forms and not really going into 3D massing. And so what we do as architects in going through is that
Todd,
we start...
before you, could
Yeah.
you just flip back for a second? Is there also a connection, a walkway connection from the peninsula to across, you know, the bridge there?
Correct.
Yeah.
I appreciate you pointing that out. In some of our earlier concepts, we talked about improving the bridge going across here, connecting to Mariner's Mile. Right now, the bridge going across there is pretty hectic to get across there with kids. I've done it a couple times, and I'm worried that they're going to fall into traffic every time. So the idea was proposing a widened or expanded parkway along here by attaching it to the bridge, maybe with a cantilever, but allowing a larger pedestrian connectivity zone at this pinch point, and then filtering them down either through the ramping system or maybe a secondary ramping system down to the water's edge right here. And that would be one of the concepts in
To
this
provide a
alternative.
continuous walkway then from the access at the, I guess, for lack of a better, south end of the dock, continuous walkway all the way up and around and
Correct.
across over to Mariner's Mile.
Correct.
Okay.
So as we're designing in 2D, we're also looking at 3D. And this is a very rough SketchUp model of the site as it is right now. You can see the existing Lido Marina area right here, the Vornado piece. There's the parking structure. And all these are actually to scale of what they are today. Google Earth's an amazing program. It tells you actually how tall things are. In contrast, if you guys can see, this is the existing tower that's there right now. So if you want to talk about scale and massing, this is the existing building right there and how big it is and compared to some of the other buildings that we're proposing for this area right here. The areas that are a little bit shaded, a little bit darker, are above the 35-foot height limit that is part of the general plan right now. And from the very beginning, we've been talking about to really improve the architecture and really improve the spaces that would be a great fit for this area. You would need to go a little bit higher than the 35 feet to allow for that mezzanine level maybe, or even allow for that more open air area on the first floor. Here's another view looking at the project, looking out from the corner of Newport Boulevard and 32nd Street. But you can see how the residential that we're proposing here, in order to get the density that we would propose, we have to go 1 floor above the existing height requirement right here. Here's the existing Lido Theater. Here's the existing Griffith Building. And then right here you can see that this would be the Community Services Center with a second level mezzanine that would continue all the way across here, allowing people to start here, go up the stairs, walk around, view down this plaza when there's an event going on down here, and then further connect to here, and then possibly going across a bay. And I'll show that in alternative 5B. But this is the idea of getting people up. Now, as well as it being up and elevated, there is a ground floor connection. It's not like we're abandoning it. There's still 2 ways to get through the site. So I want to point that out. So this is alternative 5B. This is the kind of the optimization plan that we talked about, really looking at improving and energizing the the Lido Marina parcel up in here, continuing the Sky Bridge across over to here, connecting and then going across and providing a pedestrian bridge at this neck right here that would connect to Mariner's Mile. That would be a really big icon element, like we talked about, a landmark or a feature. Also circulation and pathways. This would be an incredible opportunity. And all of this would be at a second level, crossing over and connecting to the waterway. Again, we propose looking at a very dramatic, different dock configuration and for this marina, and that would be almost a large yacht marina, what you see in the south of France or in some places in Florida. You would also have a very large improved boardwalk along here with some pop-outs that would engage and bring people out to the waterway to capture these long-term views. But also, as part of this program, we really left the back side of this dock open for residents. The idea was that you would have like what you have on Balboa Island or in the Balboa Peninsula, you have these public docks where you can come and tie up and bring your Duffy or bring your paddle boards or your kayaks, tie up, and then go experience the shops down in here. So these slips right here are designated slips, but then everything back in here would be open to the public to allow the public to use this space right here. Another key component that we
Todd,
talked about, yes.
The pop-outs, structurally, how are those handled?
Structurally, those would probably be handled with a bulkhead, or they could be pilings driven into the ground. There's two ways you can look at it. Right now, it's probably, I don't know, that's a detail that we have to work out in the detail plan. But in talking to our marina consultant, it's probably better if we were to do pilings. The water quality, and this is what we've been told, and there's probably some experts here, but with what goes on with the boat show, that the Harbor Commission and as well as Coastal, it's less of an issue to put in pilings than it would be to improve an entire bulkhead out in that area. So that's the idea. It would be suspended to some degree. Okay. One of the other options would be reconfiguring this retail right here and pulling it back and eliminating Via Porto coming through, allowing this promenade right here to really be accentuated. Provide a drop-off right here. You could walk and experience this whole retail zone down in here. But we're really trying to get people up to a second level and introduce to getting the views and getting above the boats. That's the key thing, and I'll show it more in the 3D. One of the other components that we've added in here for an optimization is looking at introducing a hospitality or a hotel, a boutique hotel, not a large one, but a small one that would give an anchor. There was a couple mentions of different residents saying that they want to have an anchor, a draw to pull people up to here, and that was one of the suggestions. Now, as we're looking at this as an optimization, it's a proposal that we've discussed with Vornado. They like the idea of optimizing their property, but they don't know if they're going to do it just yet, but they are open to this idea. So they're not necessarily going to go out and build this tomorrow, but they're open to this idea, and I want to make sure that's clear.
How many rooms are you thinking of on the hotel?
Depends on the operator, but you're looking probably at a minimum of 80, maybe up to 120, maybe 150 max. That would be one of the larger ones out there. And you have restaurants, you'd have maybe some small conference facilities, very small, nothing like a huge conference facilities up in at the Marriott or the Hyatt or anything like that, but smaller scale, like what you'd see up in Manhattan Beach at Shutters or at Metlock. There's a hotel up there called Shades that works like that. One of the great options with the optimization plan is that you're really emphasizing the beach to the bay and drawing people through and up on the second level and getting them into the marina area. And that's what we really want to play up, in that on all the different alternatives, the City Hall site, the Violito Plaza site are pretty much the same, as well as the Marshall, the Olin, and the other Marshall component. But it's introducing a different element as an anchor up in here, a destination. And then the only other option that we're talking about down here is introducing for-rent housing, workforce housing, housing for young professionals or move down, but something will help stimulate foot traffic in that area, but also be on a long-term ground lease. It wouldn't be a for-sale product that we're looking at right now, and Richard Galls can get into details on that. So in looking at this, again, we're still looking at it in 3D. You can see the proposed pedestrian bridge coming across, starting at the ground level, then going up to a second level, and it comes in at the second level. And you have a second level mezzanine working all the way around through the site, down here across to the community service center. So that's the idea of getting people up. And what you're able to provide is a destination. As you cross over the bridge, you see a pedestrian bridge. You have a gateway, an element. As you come down here, down Violito, there's another opportunity for a gateway element with a bridge and a pedestrian bridge coming across. Now, again, this is a concept. We still have to work out the details with air leases and all that, but this is one of the ideas that has been thrown out and talked about with many of the different landowners involved. Again, you can see some of the height issues, the height coming up here. It's the same building height, just a different number of units in here, as well as right here you can see the 660 building. One of the other components that we were talking about, as soon as you start introducing rental housing, because the parking demand, we were proposing maybe a parking structure over here. Now, right now, as it exists in the plan, or as it is, both Marshall and Olin need those lots right now to facilitate parking based upon conditional uses that they have in agreement with the city. So any improvement on that would have to be some other negotiation. We can't just go in there and take it. It's theirs, and they own it right now. So in order to help by expanding this parcel right here or expanding this parcel, a lot of the parking could be taken up here, but it would have to be in negotiations with Marshall and with Olin. That's one of the concepts that was thrown out there by some of the stakeholders. That could be an option. Okay, so now, after we've been talking about the whole City Hall, or the whole project itself, the large scale, now we're going to zoom in on City Hall and the bulk of what this presentation is about. Now, again, this is a first pass concept, so I really want to have people come up or have comment from council to really think about what can go here for the City Hall. This is one of our initial concepts based upon input that we've had. And again, it's introducing a canal plan. And this is a rough sketch that our designers did, in that you have the water element coming through here and connecting out through the site and then connecting through the Marshall property right here. Now, this water element is intended to be smaller scale right now. It would be a fountain, a glorified fountain, so to say. We keep or try to preserve as much as possible the 2 trees that are here right now out in front of City Hall. We'd introduce water elements right here like a fountain or a bubbler to help mitigate the noise that's generated along Newport Boulevard. As part of the community service center, the idea was that the building would be elevated and that you would capture the parking underneath. We're looking at about 40 to 45 spaces, depending upon the amount of square footage that's involved there. Roughly anything from 5 to 50 or 10 to 15,000 square feet. But attached to it, what we really want to introduce is an amphitheater where you can have outdoor entertainment and venues, and then people could sit around this plaza right here and enjoy it, as well as the water feature going through the site. And then on the second tier level, you could have people overlooking these events and experiencing the second level walkway, going up a stairwell to here, coming through there. But really, the water wouldn't be something you could bring a Duffy down day 1, phase 1, as it said in the paper today. But it would be something that's a touchable, feelable experience water element through the site. And so we're going to throw up some concept images here that are trying to go through what we want to do here. Now, the Community Service Center, there are a bunch of elements in the Community Service Center, and the programming can only be so much. We're talking about a very limited site here, very limited size. We also want to make sure that we're not competing with Marina Park. That's one of the main things, is that the uses that we're proposing here would service the people of Newport Beach, more in particular the peninsula and West Newport, but try not to compete for programming uses like it would have in Marina Park, because there's been a lot of effort and a lot of heartache going into getting that finalized, and it's a great project that you don't want to just turn around and do something else with and kind of cannibalize it, so to say. So in looking at the Community Service Center, this is a program list or a program wish list. Not all of these elements are going to be incorporated, but you can pick and choose pieces of it. In sitting in the 23rd meeting, we heard loud and clear that, there could be some opportunities for recreational activities. We talked about training rooms. One of the ideas was opening a catering kitchen that could be adjacent to the amphitheater. So if you can have an event with food, entertainment, can all be contained right there. Public safety was another big topic right here. Many of the residents talked about police substation. Maybe there's a substation for the bicycles. Maybe it's a place for the harbor resources to be located. One of the components was also physical fitness. Maybe there's a gym facility. Maybe there's a community outreach program that could be there. And then the other considerations that we need to make sure that we look at is that there could be some visitor elements here. The community center, the visitor center is up by Fashion Island. Maybe there needs to be one down here on the peninsula that's expanded or even better. That's an idea and a concept. And we'd like to hear from the people here in the audience if that's good or bad, or if there's another idea. So in going through the proposed City Hall site, we have a couple of key elements that we're going to go through here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Richard Gaulis from the Concord Group. But we really want to talk about the iconic buildings that can be associated with the community service center, as well as the fire station right here. And they want to create buildings that are open and accessible, that engage the open space, and they're community serving. And these are just some examples of buildings that are out there. A little more contemporary in feel and flavor. This is just a concept. It could be a little bit more traditional, a little bit more beachy, or a little bit more East Coast beachy if we want to implement that design guideline for the area. Again, the other element is the residential. And looking at the residential, because this could be a much more intensive use here, there are ways to mitigate that. And looking at the edges and making it feel a little bit more to the personal scale. You know, this is a parking garage down in Old Town Temecula that's wrapped with the building right here and the uses right here. That could be incorporated right down in this area. You can also incorporate green walls and green screens that help mitigate that as well. So there are different ideas and concepts of what we want to put in here. But at the same time, this will help define what the area is, and we really want to engage that in the public space. We don't want to turn our backs to it either. Again, the Canal Promenade, we really want to create an interactive water feature. You've seen some of these pictures before, but also create a pedestrian walkable area. Maybe introduce some follies, some art, some tangible elements that you can touch. But again, this is a placeholder right now. There needs to be much further analysis on it. But the idea is that it would be something that is touchable, that people can experience, and remember that Newport Beach is really about water.
How wide do you think that's going to have to be? The space, not the canal, but the space going through there?
Right now, we're estimating about 24 feet. It could go wider, but we're estimating that, or I'm sorry, it could go narrower. But the estimation is about 24 feet right now. So one of the last components of this is an amphitheater. And again, we'd like to attach it to the building here so you could have dual uses. You can have entertainment venues. There could be some shade structures. There could be some ramping and seating areas right here. It could even flow into a water element like you see here. Again, this is a desert landscape, but the idea is a concept that you have the water, the amphitheater all connected to each other. I think shade is a huge element because it's so open. We would like to provide shade so people would stay there and linger in these areas once the event's done.
How many people would be able to be accommodated in it?
Don't know right now. I mean, probably maximum maybe about 200 people. It's a pretty small set right now. So one of the other components that we were discussing and thinking about is, here's the City Hall site. Here we are right now in this building. We talked about this connection to the beach and going down 32nd Street. I think another component we need to look at outside of what we're looking at right now is that this connection right here needs to be enhanced and needs to be embellished. When you stand on this corner, you can physically see the ocean. And so there are a couple different elements, like we talked about with the components of creating a framework, and that you have vertical elements in the palm trees here. It really allows it to provide a destination or a path. You can introduce different paving patterns and different segues as you can go through from one zone to another or one district to another. I'd like to encourage seating areas with shade so that you can not, this walk right here isn't so bleak and so stark. But we also want to encourage, potentially there's going to be a bank right here, that this edge, this pedestrian edge is enhanced and not a negative edge of just a sea of parking. So the opportunity right here would be more of a landscape application as opposed to a physical land plan and putting buildings out there because they're already going. But it would be an enhancement of 32nd Street to help connect the beach to the bay and going through the City Hall site. Excuse me. So last but not least, the parking inventory. Now, this is a part of angst from the very beginning, and that we're trying to solve all the parking issues with the City Hall site and all the different partners. We went through the parking code. We've had long discussions with planning staff and with Public Works, and there are deficits in the area. We recognize these deficits right now. But as they speak right now, everyone parks as it is, in that through conditional use permits and through grandfathering, the permitted uses here are covered. If we do any intensification, we're going to have to do a whole new parking analysis for this area. To say that the parking code can apply here and just drop on top is difficult at best. The parking code is a great code. It has to do what it has to do for certain elements. But here, what we would recommend as a team, as a design team and implementation team, that we take a more comprehensive look at a larger overall village-wide parking district or parking program. We're not going to be able to solve it in a concept plan right now, but it needs to be addressed, and I think it can be improved upon. There's been a lot of discussions and a lot of debate about parking counts and parking calculations, about different areas and urban infill areas, and there's a direct correlation between use and parking as opposed to just saying a code. So that's what we would propose, that you do an inventory with a specialized group that could say, okay, you have X amount of square footage, this is how much it's used, this is how many parking spaces there are, let's apply this to a code for this area in particular, and that's what we would recommend. So right now, if we look at alternative 5A and 5B, you're looking at a parking deficit. If we were to use the code as it is today, verbatim, we're looking at roughly a deficiency of 580 to 230 spaces, so it's quite a significant impact. The difference between the two is with a parking structure. The parking structure roughly takes up about 240 spaces, so that's the difference right there. So if we're going to introduce a parking structure, you're definitely doing better. But the intent of all the different landowners and the different land users here is that they want to park on their own. They want to self-contain, they want to self-park. And no one wants to burden anyone else with the deficiencies. So again, I think an area-wide comprehensive plan would be in order for the next steps in going forward here.
Does the parking deficit include the charter boats, or is that
Yes,
separate?
it does. Yes,
That
it
includes
does.
all the current charter boat operations?
It does.
And the net impact of those operations is around 100 spaces? Did you try to estimate
Yeah.
that?
140,
140
based upon our preliminary.
spaces.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the traditional parking structure, it's not an automated structure, right?
No, I mean, it can be,
Uh-huh.
but we're just presuming if we're to introduce a parking structure, it would be much more the traditional kind. So there's a parking problem. I think the whole peninsula has a parking problem, but it's amazing how you can always find a place somehow, somewhere during an event. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Richard Gaulis and the Concord Group to go over the financials for the City Hall site in general itself. So we're trying to move this along here. Oh, there you are. Gosh, right there.
Sneak up on, which button is which?
This is to go forward. This is the mouse.
Got it. Okay. So, great. Mayor Henn and councilmen and councilwomen, thank you very much for having us again. We appreciate it. Let's see. Here we go. Great. Our focus today is really to try to put some numbers around the concept plans that Todd and the team presented to you. And as we look at this, these are some of the high-level numbers that relate to what was drawn in the pictures. As we look at the City Hall site in particular, and we'll focus in on it, we have Area 5A, 5B, and a second scenario for 5B. 5A encompasses the senior housing primarily. 5B encompassed the residential workforce housing and live-work. And then 5B2, which is a little bit of a tweak, was adding ground floor retail onto the corner. So fundamentally the same, but we were asked to look at adding that retail as part of the program to see how that played out. In addition to that, we looked at the Vernado property, the Duda property, the Marshall property, and the Olin properties in terms of what is identified in either their proposals or proposals that we've drawn into the plan with their involvement. Let's see if I can get this right. When we start to flow this through in terms of the values that we're looking at, we were focusing on a couple different factors. One, what are the built values of the housing units, whether they're for sale or for rent? What are the values associated with a hotel or retail? Linear footage lease rates for marina slips per the configurations, commercial values, and other residential values associated throughout the plan. And what's important here is that as we look at the different alternatives, the variance between 5A and 5B is primarily a result of the value of the hotel that is shown in the 5B scenarios. So in 5A in total, we have a total built value of approximately $180 million, rounding. And in 5B, we're in the range of 220 to possibly up to 250 million. Again, the major difference is between the hotel scenario in B and the one that does not have it in A. What does it mean for our City Hall site? And what I'd like to do, I think, is to share with you, we have this table, but then also show it graphically as we compare the three. We looked at the values of the properties on site and made some assumptions based on revenue and marketability as to what the senior housing units would be worth, the workforce housing, the live-work, residential flats, and also commercial property, and flowed that out. And ultimately, we have built values in the first scenario of approximately $40 million for senior housing. The second scenario, which is primarily residential workforce and live work, about $35 million. And the final scenario, which adds a little bit of retail, but actually shifts the program a little bit, generates about $32 million as well. We looked at what the implication is specifically for the city as it relates to your property tax share agreement and potential retail sales tax. And we're generating in scenario A about 700,000, let's see, am I right, Raj? I'm sorry, about $70,000 per year in property taxes as we round. In the first scenario, about 70,000, 60 to 70 in the third, and about the same. Not a big variance in terms of the recurring tax revenue that we're generating, obviously, from our tax share agreement. When we look at the ultimate land values, we generate about $8 million in the first, in scenario 5, and somewhere around 6, 6.5, maybe $7 million in the second. And then when we do some analyses on ground leases, we end up with a recurring revenue of about $800,000 in the first, and somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 in the second. So as we think about the comparisons here, there are not significant differences that are generated in the two plans for the City Hall site, which is really important for us as we look at it. I mean, seriously, when we start looking at the value, we're looking at, again, about $40 million to about $35 million between the other two scenarios. The question really is, ultimately, how do you want that deal, so to speak, to be structured? And that becomes less of a market and economic issue and more, perhaps, of a policy issue. Because as we ultimately look at the land values, we're at about, again, as we said, about $8 million in A and somewhat less, somewhere in the high sixes to $7 million for the B scenario.
Why is the senior?
The answer to that, why is the senior scenario higher? The reason is because of the density. We've got 100 units, and also because we've got a significant amount of the housing in the workforce configuration, so a more moderate price housing scenario there. That's a very good question.
We have not tried to define what we mean by senior housing, right? It would be age-restricted in some respect. But is the senior housing element that you're reflecting here, could it contain, for example, a minority element of assisted living?
It could. Yeah, it could. And that's why when, I'm not sure if Todd mentioned in this presentation or others, when we start talking about the senior housing, there's flexibility in the number of units. So in this particular case, we could, within the same building envelope, and Todd, you can jump back out on this one, or Carol can speak to it too. If we were to introduce an assisted living element, the unit sizes would be significantly smaller, and so therefore we'd incorporate that probably in a similar building envelope. And order of magnitude, the average values would end up being pretty close to the same thing. The big difference, and we discussed this among our team, and I think in another one of the study sessions, is that this is a function of looking at what the desires are of the community in terms of different housing options. And the feedback that we were getting in some of the other meetings. Because those of us who are looking, for example, at quote-unquote pure market rate for sale housing, we could probably design a plan on 3.5 acres that would probably generate upwards of probably $50 or $60 million of total value, or upwards of probably an additional $4 million or even $5 million in land value on that piece, but that would be quote-unquote a pure market rate for sale condominium deal, which really wasn't what the direction the communities provided to the plan.
Is there less parking required generally for senior housing?
That's also another point. There's less parking required for senior housing, which is another important piece about being able to fit the units on the property.
And consequently, less traffic assumed to be associated with them.
Right, for two reasons. Number one, the less traffic, but also because of the accessibility to other commercial uses, the shopping and other things that are nearby, irrespective of the number of cars.
Okay. So. All right. Does that conclude your presentation then, Tim? We'd like to hear from the major stakeholders at this point. I see Don Howard from the Fritz Duda Company. I see, I think, all of the major stakeholders. So, Don, if we need to try to move things along, so anything you can do to help, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, Mayor Henn, fellow council members, city staff, and audience. My name is Don Howard. I'm here representing the ownership of Violito Plaza. I have to share with you, it's very exciting to start the new year talking about positive momentum for the revitalization of the Lido Village area. It's been long in coming and well-deserved. On behalf of Violito Plaza and our tenants, we'd like to thank Council for commissioning the study in the first place and for having the foresight to structure it as a public-private collaboration, which I think has been very beneficial. We'd like to express appreciation to T.C. Collins and Associates and WHA Architects for their hard work and guidance and creativity as they've created a valuable and viable master plan. I call it a master plan for the benefit of the village and the greater Newport Beach community. We're very pleased to express our full support for the master plan presented to you today, Scheme 5B, which is up there, and in particular the reuse that's been described for the City Hall property. We're joined at the hip, so to speak, Violito Plaza and City Hall for many, many years. While the focus is the City Hall reuse today, we want to point out to the Council that the plan provides the necessary compatibility for the uses proposed for the City Hall and for the redevelopment opportunities proposed for Violito Plaza that we'll talk about a little later. It also gives us the flexibility to accomplish the redevelopment on both of our different time frames for the short-term horizon and the long-term horizon. I think that's very important. We've historically been the quality resident-serving retail location for the peninsula and the surrounding communities. We want to preserve that heritage. The recent announcement of our Pavilions grocery store relocating across the street to what we consider to be the beach tourist and convenience location compared to ours. We need to move very quickly to retain not only our retail heritage, but to reverse the retail sales loss that the city and ourselves are going to be experiencing in communities like Costa Mesa. We strongly urge you to move quickly to approve the master plan, and we think it's been carefully crafted by the consultants and the entire study group. It's important to point out that through the collaboration of all the parties, the master plan does not create really an intensification of uses that's already provided in the zoning for the properties, including City Hall. And in some cases, there's actually a reduction. The consultant team has identified numerous opportunities just reviewed to increase city revenues with the master plan. We're committed to being good neighbors to our adjacent Lido Village property owners and have carefully planned for our redevelopment to be self-contained in terms not only of parking on site, but also to bring customers and our delivery vehicles access to the property via public streets rather than encroaching upon adjacent property as we currently do with the City Hall site. We ask that the same spirit of cooperation from the other property owners within Lido Village, and to that end we encourage the recently suggested independent parking management study for the greater area. We need to identify parking shortage, parking infringement, which we call poaching, and circulation deficiencies that have been exacerbated over the years for all of our properties, such as the parking at Lido Marina Village and the impact that was brought up earlier about the party boat permits. The numerous benefits adopted with the master plan, as pointed out by Todd, include creating the sense of place, arrival, identity, also creating state-of-art design guidelines, which we would probably be the linchpin starter with our project. It can provide the individual creativity and at the same time develop desirable consistency and appearance for creating the sense of place. We also recognize the need for redevelopment phasing key to the residents' needs, market conditions, and the individual property owner's financial capabilities. Phasing of the redevelopment on different time schedules can be accomplished without compromising the goals and integrity of the master plan. I think that's very important. As I mentioned previously, we find the reuse plan for City Hall property to be compatible with the redevelopment plan for our project, Violito Plaza, as presented on the master plan. It encourages flexibility necessary for the city to phase in the public benefit uses that have been brought up, including the canal, the waterway, and it allows us to continue our efforts to immediately and successfully serve the retail needs of our tenants and our customers. We provided the consultant team with illustrations of the state-of-the-art construction, development, and design standards, some of which have been shown, which we will commit to in our redevelopment plans being first out, and which will integrate into and complement the future redevelopment of what you choose to do with the City Hall property. We compliment T.C. Collins and WHA for creating the master plan recognizing the need for public plazas, social gathering spaces, enhanced landscaping and hardscape, public community uses, integrated pedestrian and vehicular circulation, and construction of the much-needed new fire station. We're also very proud to include in our plans the preservation of the landmark Regency Lido Cinema.
Don, you're pretty much out of time. Are you
Okay.
about ready to wrap up here?
Yes. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
One quick question for Don. Oh, the reoccupation of the Pavilions building and redesign of it, I think, is time critical for you.
Yes.
Besides the lot line adjustment that would be necessary between the two properties, what else is critical that the city needs to move ahead on to accommodate your needs?
There's really three areas. It's the lot line adjustment, the confirmation of the uses on the City Hall property so that we can properly plan our development and explain to our new anchor tenant prospects what's going to be next door and how we're linked together. And then the third and most important for us would be expedited processing of our entitlements. So those three areas are key, and of course we're on the bubble now because our anchor tenant is moving by mid-year, and we need to develop the plans to move forward and fill our shopping center lease. Two areas that we would request that we have a little bit of reservations on, just to finish on the elements mentioned, would be the Sky Bridge or second-level bridge. We think there's considerable more study to be done on that. However, we would not at all compromise the pedestrian linkage that needs to occur on all three major properties, City Hall, Violito, Lido, Marina Village. I think it's something that needs to be worked out. The second one is we'd like to preserve independent access from Findlay Avenue off of Newport Boulevard without sharing to work out issues that have developed over the years here with confusion over attending a retail center and coming to a City Hall property. We think there are issues there that we should work on together to help solve those for the long term and accomplish the goals of both properties. So we would ask for further study in those areas.
In terms of your second consideration, identifying what the uses at the City Hall will be, what level of specificity? I mean, is residential okay, residential, commercial? I mean, it may take us a little while longer to lock in,
Right.
our plans.
If we look at 5B or 5A, the uses that are proposed there are entirely compatible with what we consider to be beneficial for both properties.
What uses might you consider incompatible?
Probably a significant amount of additional retail,
Okay.
unless it was coordinated in a way that we didn't have counterproductive competitive situations. The properties are quite small when viewed independently of each other. But the residential certainly is complementary. And so are the public uses. It's just the issue of how we share access and parking, because we have to provide free parking. You can see we're the only island there with surface parking. So it's a magnet.
All right, any
Thank
other
you.
questions for the Duda Company?
I have some letters from our tenants and local residents in favor of your adoption of this master plan, and some of them are here to speak later. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Don. Other stakeholders, Marshall Properties? Marshall Properties has for everyone's reference, has the triangle there where the churches are located and the real estate office there.
Right. Mayor Henn and members of the council, my name is Matt Montgomery, and I represent Bayfront Holdings LP. Our group has made a significant investment in the Lido Village area. As early as 4 months ago, we acquired, as Mayor Henn was indicating, 3 individual parcels that are all located within this general area. Back in November, when we started looking at the master plan and some of the plans that the team had put together, our first concern was for our triangle parcel, where we had planned a townhome project. Our first concern was the location of a loading area directly adjacent to our property. We bought the property on the basis that we were going to be able to redevelop it. The subject parcel is currently an office building that's non-compliant. So when we started looking at the redevelopment of a townhome project, our first concern was a loading area directly adjacent to townhomes that we would want to sell. After much discussion with Tim and Todd and the team, including staff, we realized that not only were we challenged with a loading area or loading dock, but we were also a parcel that was subject to a potential canal. Obviously, there may be benefits to a canal that run through a property. There's also efficiency challenges that come along with that. With all this being said, it's been a very collaborative effort with not only staff and the consultant teams, but hopefully our collaboration over the last several weeks, in fact, has reached a win-win, I guess, for our team and hopefully the city. We encourage the council to support the overall master plan. I think there's a lot of thought and efforts that's gone into this, and we've got a lot of work to do. We don't fully understand what we have quite yet, but we are in support of providing some public access, and we understand the necessities of our adjacent ownerships as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Let's see. I'm sorry? Nikhil Varnado. Nikhil, would you care to make some comments? Varnado is the owner of the Violito Village property here.
Mayor Hen, members of the council, I'm Nikhil Guerra. I represent Vornado, based in San Francisco, so I came down for this meeting today. Generally, we're in favor of anything that you do to rejuvenate the neighborhood and our property. We're in favor of the master plan. I do have some hesitancies about the conceptual discussions we've had here. Namely, we are not hotel developers. I think it was mentioned before that it's pretty clear to me. I don't think we're going to develop a hotel, but if that's the highest and best use, obviously we would like the zoning so that we could bring in a partner or we could do something which is value accretive. Similarly, with the docks, we have what we have today. We have a number of slips, and there's a certain amount of boats that can fit there. If we lose a lot of that, we lose value. So we have concerns of that nature, but those small details aside, conceptually we are in favor of coming up with a cohesive master plan for the entire area which is beneficial to all. I do want to compliment the whole team. Everybody's worked pretty hard in a collaborative fashion to get where we are, and I'm happy with the results so far. So, thank you.
Any questions for Nikhil? Okay, thank you, Nikhil. All right, so we do have time set aside here for public comment. Public comment would be 3 minutes in length per speaker. We ask that you respect that time limit and out of respect for other speakers so that we have time here to work through this. May I have a show of hands of how many public comments we may have? How many people do intend to make comments? Okay, great. If you can just sort of cue yourselves up a little bit so we are as efficient as possible. May we have the first speaker then for public comment? Please state your name.
My name is Larry Porcelli with Regency Theaters, and we just want to say thank you for this whole project and for moving it. We support it. We've been a part of the community since 1938. We've seen generations of people come through the theater, bringing them back, families, and we would like to see the area become more than historic, but to become vital again and exciting. And that would be why we are in favor of this. It's just wonderful. We're a part of the community. We have everything from regular first-run films to bringing the local high schools film to the Newport Beach Film Festival to even the upcoming honoring of President Reagan. And we're just excited that and hope that this can move quickly. Thank you very much, and we support it all the way.
Thank you, Larry.
Hi, Russ Fluter. After we learned that the city was considering different options for the site, We discussed some of these options with residents and neighbors. And a couple of comments. I think it is a mistake to rush this plan. I see that there's some kind of a swell to get this done real fast in order to maybe save a tenant in the retail side, but it's a pretty major decision. Lee Stearns, architect, has done several projects in the area here, and he's done a plan that includes an apartment project on the existing site as it is without a lot line adjustment, and leaves room for a fire station on the site. We feel that this project would be the best use for the property for the following reasons. A quality residential apartment project, apartments are needed in the area. There are very few quality apartments on the peninsula area. They're mostly old duplexes and nothing that's newer. An apartment project in between Lido and Cannery Village would make a nice transition between the two areas. The property could be held for the city long-term and leased out, and it would create a cash flow, we feel, as much as the senior housing. Something, just some quick numbers that we've done on, if you go 99 units, which is what was proposed for the senior housing, we feel that there could be in the nature of $500,000 a year of cash flow generated from the site. The project that Lee has done includes the parking in the center of the site, and I noticed that the project that was done for the senior housing had a platform with parking that's visible from the streets, and he's going to go over a little bit about his plan. And also, the project that he's done works for either high-end apartments or retirement housing, because they both, the only difference is the retirement housing would have a substantially less parking. It might be good to have extra parking even if you do retirement housing, because the area is short of parking. We don't feel that retirement housing is the best use on the peninsula for this site. I think retirement housing is needed in the city. But after discussion with a lot of the neighbors and people around town, it seems that retirement housing might be better up near Hoag Hospital or in a different location. You've got bars and traffic, and it almost seems like somebody's proposing retirement housing just because you could say, well, there aren't that many people that are going to cause traffic or parking. But it's also important to have a use that ties in with the neighborhood. And we're talking about an upscale project that would include young people and mature people.
Russ, we're going to need you to wrap up here.
I did wrap up. Thank you.
All right, great. I appreciate that.
Do I have any time?
Really, we don't.
Can I hand you the plan?
Yes, you may. We would certainly be glad for that. If you want to take a minute or two and just do a very quick description of it, that's fine.
I'll go as fast as I can. My name's Lee Stearns, Stearns Architecture. My charge from Russ was pragmatic. No land swap, maintain a site for the fire station, a practical plan that could be executed today. It's a wrap project which puts the parking structure at the center. You don't see the parking structure from any place around the building. The buildings always meet the ground. Parking structure is naturally ventilated. A lot of details we could talk about for that. Potential for some live-work on the ground level. The second idea is a kind of a traditional idea in reinforcing the grid, the city grid, the block structure. This scheme accepts the existing geometry of the market that's next door, meets the street on all sides, and reinforces the streets that are in the area. The only other thing, this is my slight editorializing, I would be reluctant to start removing life from the street in thinking about these future plans. One of the great things about Lido Village and the Cannery Village and all of that is the intimacy, the streets, the narrow streets, the kind of character of the neighborhood. Streets need all the life they can get. Sidewalk cafes are on the sidewalk, that sort of thing. The minute you start moving circulation internal to a block or to the up above, you're removing it from the street. So this scheme is about pragmatism, reinforcing the existing qualities of the streets.
Thank you very much.
I'd love to say a lot more, but thanks.
Well, we have been at this for several months now, and so it's, go ahead, Bob.
Good evening, Mayor Henn, council members. My name is Bob Rush. I'd echo what Mr. Fluter had mentioned a moment ago. If this is going to become a vibrant section of our community, which is the main intent to re-energize what we've lost over the last 20 or so years, we have to have a vibrant composition of its occupants. To dedicate a huge area of the Newport Boulevard face to senior housing and a small section to what's called a community service center, I think it would be a drastic mistake. I mean, we would essentially be compromising something very valuable in the benefit of what? Parking places? That's the only benefit that I saw, because the financial benefits were marginally different. So we need to have a vibrant composition of occupants. It can't go specifically senior. That's a true, I think, formula for failure. That's my main concern. I do believe Mr. Collins has done a great job and his team in advancing the ball forward. I'm not sold on some of the aspects of it, but he's done a great job compared to the last time we were here a month ago. I have one other concern, and this comes in light of something I caught on the Community Service Center page, which identifies Hoag Community as coming in and being an occupant on this space. Now, I have a problem with that because one of the primary contributors to this recommendation is Government Solutions, who has a significant and long-standing financial relationship with Hoag Hospital. So before anything goes further with Hoag Hospital, I think Government Solutions should come up here and fully disclose that relationship and be willing to covenant certain limitations of their involvement with Hoag's further development of this site.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Mayor Henn, council members, I'm Hugh Helm from Lido Island. Speaking for myself, I think this is a pretty good start on a concept. It's a much better concept than what the council saw the first time. I do have two requests or recommendations to make to you. The deterioration that we see in this area today, I believe, is really demonstrates that this project can't be sufficiently supported in an economic sense by just the local populace alone. So as you move forward with a final concept and more detailed planning, I really encourage you to keep high on your list of considerations the need for this to become a destination, so that we draw in tourist dollars and draw in money from others in the Newport Beach and other areas. I think that's really got to be a very, very important consideration as you move forward. Secondly, Lido Island is a living area that's very heavily impacted by what you do here. And I would urge and recommend that Lido be made a player in the planning that goes forward, and suggest that you ask the Lido Isle Community Association to appoint a representative or representatives to be a part of the planning as you go ahead. Thank you very much.
My name is Nancy Helm. That was my spouse up there. And my comment's very brief. When we talk about a sense of place, it seems to me that Lido Theater has always defined this area. When I was a kid, a teenager, it was Lido Theater. And I'm sure that's true for many generations of people. And I would like to see Lido Theater almost become the focal point visually. And I noticed that there's a median still running down the middle of Via Lido. To me, it would make sense to eliminate that median and to widen the sidewalk in the area of the Griffith Building and Lido Theater, so that you do have more outdoor, maybe pedestrian, maybe cafe, whatever it is, that really centers on that Lido Theater. And I would encourage any architectural design to be compatible with that theater, because I think it is a very important piece. The other thing I want to quickly mention is this 140 parking spaces needed for charter boat companies. Is the value to everyone from the charter boat companies that great that you feel like you've got to have 140 parking spaces? I mean, I don't understand how that operates. I don't understand the city's role in that, but that's a lot of parking for a very limited use, in my opinion.
Thank you. I understand that's what is, not necessarily what's being proposed, and so.
Mayor Henn, Councilman, Councilwoman. Jim Benson, sort of representing myself and a longstanding Elks member. In all of your plans that you seem to be approving and moving forward with, you've removed all of our slips. And I understand we're not going to be able to occupy even the same building. Part of the draw down here, at least for most of the people I know, are the quaint little places like the Elks. We've been around since 1953, and like most things that came to me in 53, yeah, we could use a facelift, but I think that's probably about all we could use. And I think we've been good members of the community. We get more scholarships than the U.S. government. I mean, we do a lot of good here, and I don't see any consideration really for us to remain with our parking lot that we own part of, with our building, and it worries me. So I just asked you to please consider the character of the area as well as the financial use of the area.
Tim, I want you to be sure to know that there's no specific proposal to do what you're suggesting here to disenfranchise the Elks from their docks or whatever.
Well, they're not
we're talking reconfiguration here, but not taking away the docks as far as you're concerned. You know, what your current dock.
Actually, they're not in the proposals, and the proposals include all the big ships right in front of our building, which we would not be able to see the bay at all anymore.
Okay.
So please take a closer look at that, sir.
All right.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks.
My name is Blaine Bush. I'm a lifelong resident of Newport. I live on the Peninsula Point. I raised my kids here. And anyway, I just wanted to say that I'm glad that we are doing something to sort of increase the threshold of what I consider the, all the residents and the tourists that live in this area come through. So I just want to express my support and say thank you for doing something just to revitalize it, because my opinion is that the vacancy in the village and the city hall, well, not the city hall, but the Lido Plaza, it's just languished for far too long. So thank you for just doing something at all just to increase the activity, increase the beauty of it, and hopefully take something that's really kind of a hidden jewel that's been sitting dormant for way too long. Just something needs to happen there. So I just want to offer my support for the full master plan of this. Thank you.
Mike.
Good evening, everybody who's here. My name is Linda Klein, and I live on Lido Isle. My education and professional involvement in the field of senior living began in the 1970s when I did graduate work at USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology, worked professionally in affordable senior living communities also. In the 80s, I represented my community in the White House Conference of Aging in Washington, D.C. I have a strong understanding of senior housing options and the value of seniors in our community. Lido Island has a large cohort of senior citizens. In planning a vibrant destination area and a beautiful and energized upscale gateway to the peninsula, affordable senior housing simply does not fit. There are far more appropriate locations in Newport Beach for affordable senior housing. An appropriate component for the redevelopment of Lido Village as a vibrant destination area would be luxury condominium communities or luxury apartments. The residents of these places would make good customers for upmarket restaurants, upmarket shops, and an upmarket or specialty grocery store. The city, I know, wants good financial remuneration for its former City Hall property, but there are many other options, and affordable senior housing does not support the plan for a vibrant upscale destination gateway to the peninsula. What happens in Lido Village is very important, and we must get it right for all the stakeholders in this project. It's imperative that we have input from selected professionals with long, successful track records in the development of great destination areas around the country. There are great ideas out there. While I don't have expertise in this particular area, I know that affordable senior housing totally doesn't work as an ingredient for this plan of a vibrant destination, Lido Village, and a gateway to the peninsula. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone else with comments? Let's move it along here. If you can queue up, we want to make sure we get through this as quickly as we can.
Mr. Mayor, Bernie Svalstad. If the council decides to put in this community service center aspect to the plan, I'd like to have you consider, as most all of you know, I've been concerned about the retention of some type of historical society place for the city. This gentleman talked about a visitor center. I think that people would be a great place for people to visit for a place for the historical preservation of the history of Newport Beach. I think this could be a great attraction, and I think it'd be a lot better than a physical fitness center or some of the things that have been discussed. So obviously out of 10 or 15,000 square feet, something like this could happen. So I'd like to have you or have the consultants put this in their plan or consider it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie.
Tom Billings. As a longtime local resident, even going way back when I was a little kid, when Richards Market was there and the Blue Dolphin, this area has always been just a wonderful kind of representative area of Newport Beach and the peninsula, kind of grassrootsy and local feeling. The effort now to make it more vibrant is great. I mean, it's necessary. At the same time, as a local resident, I actually also live on Lido. At the same time, to making it vibrant, and I know everyone's concerned about this, is to be careful not to increase the intensity and density of what's going to go in there. And I know Mike, as the mayor and now our as our representative and now our mayor, on the ad hoc committee, you know, you're very passionate about this project, and I appreciate that, and Tim Collins as well, who lives on the peninsula. So, you know, we really wanted I really want to emphasize that point, that to kind of keep it in the character and in the sort of history of the way it's been in terms of that intensity. In terms of the specifics, in terms of the retail center, Fritz Du's property, I feel great about that. I mean, I know that he has always provided a great product and will continue to. So I think the retail uses in there and the parking is going to be excellent. I kind of agree with his representative tonight, who was a little concerned about the Sky Bridge. As creative as it is to go up and have people at these higher levels looking down, I don't know. I for one, like to stay on the ground. So let's weigh that off, you know, how much people really use that higher Sky Bridge. In terms of the community service center, as you know, we were on the Marina Park project together, Councilman Selich and Mayor Henn, and there is a huge element of a community service center or community center at Marina Park already. So I would kind of lobby for, you mentioned police substation in there. I'd like to see that as a use and not, you know, overdo it, because we already have what's at Marina Park. Senior housing, I don't know much about whether that's going to be assisted living or rental units or, you know, house for sale, but originally it was 80 units when you presented to us on Lido last week. Now I hear it's 100. I think that's just too dense for this gateway project. I'd like to see it like in half. And I know you're looking at money, you're looking at the numbers, but again, let's trade it off against height, or against density. Maybe put a hardware store next to it. In terms of the canal, I'm opposed to the canal. We have enough water all around us. Green belts would be great, though, and I think that's what the interim plan is, green belts. And I know Nancy Gardner is really supportive of more open space. And then parking structures, you know, I'm concerned it's going to be filled with beachgoers. But we need some parking. So, one last point on the Marina Village parking issue, where there's 140 places. Why not go for remote parking? Shuttle those people to some other location. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Any other comments, public comments? Let's move it along here.
Hi, this is Laura Kern from Corona Del Mar. So
two main areas. One is we're planning, we're talking about what we're going to build, but I'm still trying to understand what the bigger vision is, how Vornado's properties are going to fit in, how Violito is going to fit in, what they're planning to develop, and how we're going to be talking about fitting it together, how we're going to be marketing it and making it a vital center, because it can be, and I remember it going back not to 1953, but quite a few years, so I'd like to see that. Second, circulation. We talked about the PED circulation, but I haven't heard anything about cycling access. And I think, connectivity to the marina, going over to Amares is great, but what about from the bike standpoint? And making sure, because the minute you have PED access, you're going to have bikers trying to use it. And how is that going to work? And that could really be enhancing, because I'll be honest, I drive frequently and try to figure out how, if I wanted to cycle and get on the peninsula without going around that circle, I could do that. It's not completely clear. But when people leave this area on their bike, they're going to want to go directly onto the peninsula, and it's a challenge. And also from a transit standpoint, if you take the bus to the peninsula and you try to go back south to Corona del Mar and PCH, basically right now you take the bus up Balboa Boulevard, it dumps you in front of Chronic Tacos, which, so if you know the time, you can run in and get a taco, then go wait for the bus. But then you catch your bus down PCH. If this is truly a destination, we need to look at how we have circulation to various points, and potentially it's via shuttle or other places on the peninsula, and then connectivity via our public transit in connection with OCTA onto the PCH area. So we have a lot of opportunity. We need to see how it fits together. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura.
My name is Craig Batley, and this is one of the most important projects I think the city is facing right now. Certainly the most important, biggest project here on the peninsula probably's ever had. And I agree with Russ Fluter and the previous speaker regarding senior housing. I think the word vibrant came out today, and this has to be the most vibrant project possible that can attract people from all the areas. Costa Mesa, Orange County, other parts of Newport Beach. Has to be a destination project. I think with the senior housing factor, it just is not that exciting. And we've made a great progress the last few months. Everybody's done a great job on this, and I think the latest presentation has shown that. And I think we shouldn't give up. We should try a little harder and get another couple proposals up here to incorporate some of the ideas that have been mentioned today. This is a hugely important project for the peninsula.
Mayor, City Council, Denise Oberman, Peninsula resident. Thank you for the excellent effort, and I do think that the proposed plans show a significant improvement. I share the concerns of all the speakers, and also relative to a destination, I have a concern that we don't see commitment to the anchors. At this point, we need significant, substantial anchors that are going to help both drive revenues and be used by both the residents that exist here on a sustainable basis and also visitors or tourists. Vornado representative got up and said that there is not a commitment, in fact, that Vornado would probably not do anything relative to a hospitality use. So we've got a gap there, and we need to get that fulfilled and a commitment. And I strongly feel that we do need a hospitality use with an operator and or developer that is able to have vision and drive surrounding uses that will be good, both for visitors and also for the residents of the community. Restaurants, shops, even the park types of outdoor uses. They know how to conceive of those visions and develop them. And if I agree with Mr. Batley, I do think that we need to take the extra time and care, and if we need to actively solicit other stakeholders, then we should do it, because this area is at an inflection point. If we put in institutional uses or uses that don't further revitalize, this area is going to continue to degrade, and that's going to be a lose-lose for everybody, the city as an entity and its financial sustainability, the character of it, and its usefulness and value for residents, and it's obviously it's going to cease to become a desirable area. So we do need to drive it upscale rather than downscale and make enough commitment and depth in the vision to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Anyone else wish to make a comment?
Hopefully I'm your last one. Bill Dunlap, representing St. James Church, right next door here. Just a comment. We like the plan. I think it's got a lot of merit to it. We currently have a reciprocal parking agreement with the city regarding your employees that park on our lot during the day, and we use your lot on the weekends, specifically Sunday, obviously. That's going to sunset when the City Hall moves, and we just want to make sure that we can work something out for the parking going forward for the church. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to council for consideration. I'm hopeful that council's comments can focus on the elemental uses that were shown in these plans so that we can try to get a bit of a consensus here going forward about the major elements that are represented. I do want to reserve a few minutes at the end to make sure that staff gets clear direction with regard to the consensus of council. And so with that, Councilwoman Gardner.
Well, I'm feeling very unvibrant being over 50. But I think that there's something to be said for that. I thought that was an interesting point, and perhaps the mixed tenant use would be better than, I mean, I myself wasn't thinking of affordable senior housing. I was simply thinking of what we have, like what's up next to Oasis, which is market value, but for seniors. I really like Bernie's idea about something for the Historical Society. I think we need something in Newport Beach, something that really is where we can preserve our heritage. We've frittered away a lot of it, but we've had some wonderful things involving our history as well. The flyway, I don't care if my feet are on the ground, but I think that's one of those things that's probably a lot of money for not a real lot of benefit, to me at least. That would be my reaction. And as far as, I understand how people, though, get edifice complexes. I mean, you look at all these things and I go, yeah, ooh, let's do the water. Oh, let's do this, let's do that. I do like the plan. Thank you so much for listening to everybody. I thought it was just night and day over the last one. So I did have a question, though. Is the water going through, because initially we talked about it as being a water quality product as well, that it would help that one area of the bay. And I didn't know whether it just dead-ended now into the fountains on the property.
It is still intended to be a water quality enhancement. It would be seawater flowing from the Finley track all the way through to the bay.
Right. Because I do think that gives a more value to the water aspect of it rather than simply the aesthetic, that we would be helping out an area that we haven't been able to help very much in terms of water quality.
Thank you, Nancy. Other comments?
Well, I think it's a big improvement over what we had before. The biggest thing I notice is that if you remember the last plan we looked at, there was such an emphasis on parking structures, and that's disappeared from the plan. And the central feature, the canal greenbelt concept, I think really adds that pedestrian open space feel to the area. I think that's working really good. I like the idea of the community service center. I hadn't thought of Bernie's idea about the historical aspect of it, but I think something certainly to consider here. The housing, I guess I was leaning more towards senior housing at first, but now I'm just thinking that maybe we ought to have a little bit more variety there, perhaps. I think the most critical thing we're going to have to deal with, though, on this is timing, because we've got one property owner that wants to move ahead pretty quickly, and we will have some decisions that we're going to have to make on that, primarily on whether we will do a lot line adjustment or not between the City Hall property and the Duda property, the access off of Newport Boulevard into the property, and then also whether we are going to have this canal open space area between the City Hall site and the Duda property, because if you look at the, well, either one of the plans, there's the wall that is, of the building that it's adjacent to the canal open space area would be designed differently if that space wasn't there. Ideally, we're going to want that building to be designed to have access and be open to the canal open space area. So if they're going to have to move ahead fairly quickly on their property, it seems to me there's some critical decisions there that are going to have to be made fairly quickly, and maybe those can be made and still work on the overall plan at the same time and not have to wait for the overall plan to be done to make those kind of decisions.
Other comments? Yep. Councilman Rosansky?
I will say also that I generally like the new and improved version of the design better certainly than we saw last time. And I know our time is short here, so I'm just going to be fairly quick. As far as the access off of Newport Boulevard, which we talked about in the initial part of this discussion, I think it's critical that the city maintain access at the light there, that we not give that up as part of whatever negotiation we conduct with the Fritz Duda people. I am supportive of the lot line adjustment, though, because I think both parcels could probably benefit from that. As long as the city received equal value for what we're giving up, I think that's probably a good thing to proceed forward on. I think they'll need that, whether we can come to some resolution about our property or not. And so I do favor that. As far as the actual use of our property, though, I guess I'm a little bit different here than most of the other council members or what they're thinking. I've talked about this from the get-go, and I'll reiterate it today. I think this is a very valuable and important piece of property for the city. We'll never be able to replace this piece of property again once it's gone, once it's senior housing or retail or apartments or whatever you want to make of it. And so my focus is more of a community aspect for this property. I like the idea of a community center. I hadn't thought about Bernie's idea of the Historical Society being here as well, and so that may be something that could fit into a greater civic presence on the property. I won't want to see the whole project go towards a historical center, certainly. And an idea I guess I'd like to throw out, I've talked with a couple of the council members about this, but I'm going to put it out to the public here, and we talked about it, I think when Tom Billings was up here, he talked about the community center going in down at Marina Park. We're talking about a community center here. We actually have a community center in West Newport on 15th Street that most people don't even know it exists because it's an old gymnasium and some classrooms or whatever it was before it became what it is today. And my suggestion would be, and I know we're looking at revenue, we're looking at city resources, and I say, why have 3 community centers here serving West Newport? Because 3 little community centers are not going to do the job that I think one centralized community center could do for this area, something on the order of what they have up in Newport Coast, which is a beautiful community center, and I think everybody up there recognizes what an asset it is to that community. And so I see a centralized community center on this site that would entail maybe shutting the West Newport Center that exists now at 15th Street. And if we're looking for revenue opportunities, I mean, that's a site that could be sold or monetized in some way or used for senior housing or apartments. It's a medium-density residential zoning as it exists now. It would be well in conformity with what goes on in the neighborhood. It's close to Hogue, so if you wanted to put seniors there, I think some of the other speakers spoke to that maybe it needs to be closer to Hogue or in a more residential area, not on this site. As far as the Marina Park Community Center, I know we're way down the road on that project. I mean, I think we've been working on that for years, ever since the vote years ago when we decided not to put a hotel there and to move forward with the park. But it's not too late to rethink that. That community center is halfway down the peninsula. It's not as accessible as it could be, certainly, to other residents in West Newport and along Coast Highway, people up in Newport Heights, people in Cliff Haven, could all benefit by having a localized community center similar on the order of magnitude of the Newport Coast Community Center. And from an operational standpoint, having one centralized community center, a larger one, I got to believe is going to cost less for the city to operate than having 3, smaller centers spread out. Plus, it'll have more utility because it'll be a larger center, able to accommodate more diverse and varied types of groups. And so that would be my focus, would be to maybe downplay the housing component on this site or do away with it altogether. I don't know that housing needs to be here. We saw some numbers up there. I think at best the city was looking at getting about $800,000 a year off this property, which, you know, it's not nothing. Certainly, you know, in these financial times that we find ourselves in, $800,000 is $800,000 that we probably could use. But, you know, I look at other governmental entities, like the state, for instance, is looking at selling off their office buildings, and they're going to get a big chunk of money. But, you know, they're going to wind up renting those office buildings back for the next 30 years. And so, you know, you take a short-term gain because we're in a financial situation in the short term that is tough, and you sacrifice the future and what could be here. And so, you know, I hope that we're going to look past our economic times today. We're going to look to the vision of West Newport and West Newport could be, and create a focal point here that all the West Newport residents can enjoy. And in addition to some of these other aspects, the commercial aspects of the adjoining property and hopefully the redevelopment of the Violito site. So that would be my vision and goal for this property. I think it's just too important to you know, fritter away on a basically a housing development. Thank you.
Councilman Curry?
Well, to sort of take the flip side from my colleague, Mr. Rosansky, on this, I think it's been interesting to hear what the public's had to say about the City Hall site. And what I think they've said for the most part is they want high-quality, high-end housing here. And I think our consultants have been doing backflips trying to find an appropriate public use in response to some of that direction that we've been giving them. And they've come up with the Lifelong Learning Center and senior housing and a community center and parking and all of these things. And people are telling us they really want something else. Now, I have issues with a police substation, and we had one there actually, or had one here, back in the 70s when they built the new police station, and it was found not to be efficient because it takes police officers off the street. That's not what we want to do. Police officers don't sit in a station and pick up the phone and then jump out and go to the car. We want police officers on the street. I think perhaps the best public use for this property is a revenue generator that supports all of the other things that we do in the city. We have a consensus developed on Marina Park. We've done an environmental impact report. We're ready almost to begin construction once we get our permitting done. So I don't think this is the time to sort of revisit that decision and try and you know, make those kind of decisions on an ad hoc basis like this. So I think listening to some of the feedback that we received from the public on high-end housing uses for the City Hall site, we will maintain a fire station presence here, and perhaps some other low-intensity public uses, but that's the direction I would go, and I would look to see how we can maximize the revenue of this asset, not sell it, but maximize the revenue of it going forward to support all of our city services. I do think we need, and it's been mentioned here, both good retail for both visitors and residents, both on the Duda property and also at Lido Marina Village. I would hope that our friends at Bernardo will look at the hotel idea. I think there's a broad community consensus. I'm frankly surprised by it, but I'm pleased by it, because I do think that will really help the situation here on Lido and support the economics of the restaurants and the shops that are around here. And I'd like to see us sort of move forward in that direction as well. And I think when you put all three of those elements together, you really do get a very good, high-quality, neighborhood-friendly type of development that will have very long-term positive economic consequences, not only for the neighbors and for the property owners here, but also for the city and the taxpayers going forward. So I guess that would be my direction, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Daigle?
Yes, as far as the seniors go, apparently you haven't been to the jazzercise class. I mean, they're moving. As far as the thoughts that I have, I appreciate Bernardo making the trip from San Francisco, and you have just a fantastic property, and I'm really looking forward to your future and how you orient around that bay, you know, which is really the jewel of our community. I think the urgency that's being created here is because one of the properties is losing a tenant. But, you know, with the city, you know, the government, we are slow and deliberative, and there are some good reasons for that. So it seems as if, you know, their constraint is they wouldn't want retail here that would potentially cannibalize what they're doing. So I think if we have further discussion about a housing type, then that would not cause delay to their plans. As far as the type of housing, I think there probably needs to be more discussion about that. It caught my attention when the Concord Group indicated that if we were to sell this, it would be $50 to $60 million. This is now a city hall. We're having a new city hall at considerable expense. $120 million. And if we were to apply that $60 million, we would drive our debt down in half. So I suppose I would be in the maximizing revenue camp in looking at this. So those are my thoughts at this time.
Thank you. Those who are last would be first, I guess.
I just want to say that I think that Steve made some very good points about having the 3 small community centers as opposed to one good one, and also that we didn't get a lot of reaction because that wasn't something that was really proposed to the people, so that might be something to get a reaction to. I know we do want some revenue, but I think that there were some very good points there.
Rush, did you have comments?
I do. I agree with everything that's been said. They've taught me how to be a politician already. I think that I need to back up a little bit in philosophy. I think that the plan that we see here is a vast improvement over what was presented before. My personal philosophy is this is a public asset and it should never be sold. It should be leveraged into perpetual revenue for the city that will continue to grow. And I think that any use that we use for it should ensure that that opportunity of continued ownership that parallels the increased value of the property over time is part of that basis. I certainly recognize the importance of the Duda property to focus in a timely manner on landing a market tenant. That's not uncommon in a bigger project of this type to have a firecracker that needs to be dealt with. And I think that's what we need to focus on. And I think we've done that by majority. I think we're 90% of the way there. Let's agree upon the location of the market. Let's agree upon the terms for that so that they can continue with that aspect. But I don't think that that sets the schedule for the balance of the project. I think we do need time to involve the Lido residents. I think we do need time to ferret out the various opportunities of utilization, and that once we have that market secured and the Duda company can proceed with that, then we have the flexibility, I think, of dealing with the balance of the site, of our site. I am totally opposed to giving up our access to the Finley intersection. I think that is a very valuable asset to our frontage on Newport Boulevard, and it would be unwise for us to devalue our property by having that dedicated to only the Duda property. As the Duda property design evolves, the 2 elements that I would like to make sure that we see would be a true focus on the pedestrian pods, not just a sidewalk, but the opportunity of areas outside of a dining establishment or something of that sort that would create a gathering point along the way. I'm also concerned about their service, only in the sense, and I'm sorry for a detail when we're dealing with concepts, but I think that service needs to be totally screened. There needs to be a wall that shields that so that there's not a sound issue, there's not an aesthetic issue as it relates to the property, the residential triangle as we talk about it across the street. I think that housing is important to the city site. I think that generates a population that utilizes the balance of the property and helps keep the rest of the property financially sound. I have always favored senior housing on that site because of the mitigated issues of traffic. But my definition of senior housing has not been low-cost senior housing. It's been high-end senior housing, much like we see in Newport Center. Where there might even be concierge service, and these different types of things. But clearly, whatever housing is there, it needs to be active. It needs to be housing for individuals that are out and about and taking advantage of everything from the religious services that are there to the shopping to the harbor. I think the elevated parkway is a nice planning thought, but not practical. I believe that we want to keep people on the ground level because they're the market that we're trying to utilize to shop in the stores and dine in the restaurants. And to take them away from that exposure and put them up on an elevated path is not a good marketing decision. And I also think that the concept of that elevated path having a view is not a real opportunity either, because the view will be of a parking lot. It will not be to the ocean because of the other buildings that are around, and it will not be to the harbor because of the other buildings that are around. And so, I want to keep the people on the ground so that they become part of the environment, part of the buildings. With respect to the public building, I think it is appropriate to have some kind of public service on this public land. But every square foot of a public building that we put on the land is a non-revenue generating source in probability and is an expense of ongoing operations in probability. So it is a deterrent to the economic vitality of the site. I'm not saying I would not agree to do it. I'm just saying we need to recognize that it is a deterrent to the economic value. And so if there's a way that we could put the public building on at no cost and endow it somehow or another for its operational, then I would be much more in support of that. Within that, I think Councilmember Rosansky has an idea which should be looked at, and that would be taking the 15th Street property and looking at long-term leasing that for a senior housing, potentially assisted living or something of that sort. Because as we saw from the economics, those types of properties have the economic ability to pay more for a lease than other types of activities. And then take that revenue, which is a perpetual measured revenue, and leverage that into the debt service for building whatever public service we would like to build on this site, which would, of course, have to replace what we removed from 15th Street. But if we don't look at replacing it pretty soon, I think it'll fall down anyway. So I think that there is some merit in looking at certainly that aspect of it. I think that there's just a significant opportunity here. I think we've advanced on it. I guess my conclusion is let's help Duda get his market leased, and then let's continue our planning to make sure that we take advantage of every opportunity that we can.
I just have one more comment, and that's on Councilman Rosansky's idea on the community center. In our general plan, no matter what happens with Banning Ranch, we've talked about having a community park on the edge of Banning Ranch. And I guess I've always seen that as being a place for a large Newport Coast type of community center, and not trying to put one down here on the peninsula. I think it would serve a greater number of people and would kind of balance out the community center on the other end of town. And the 15th Street site could play into how we develop the community center on the Banning Ranch property, and we could sell that off or lease it or whatever. But to put a community center on this piece of property, I don't think creates the kind of vitality that we're going to want to promote here to get this area redeveloped. So I think the rest of the council ought to maybe think about that a little bit, about if we are going to have a larger community center like Newport Coast, look more to Banning Ranch and not down into this area.
Okay, I'll just address that. Ed, if I thought that was going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years, for sure, I would tend to agree with you. But unfortunately, the Banning Ranch property, although they are serious about developing their property, that's just a big question mark. And once this property's gone, now we're relying on a question mark for our future, which may never happen. So,
Well, remember, we've talked about the community park being up there, whether Banning Ranch is developed or open space.
Well, I would presume that they want to piece it out and sell it, which they've said that they won't do, and there's a lot of what-ifs. So if you want to hang on to this piece until we determine that, I'd be in favor of that as well.
All right. What I'd like to do is try to bring some consensus. Just for my personal part, I'm thrilled with the proposal that was made today. Tremendous improvement over what we've had. I think I hear a lot of coalescing around major elements here. And so what I want to try and do is to get nodding of heads here for major conceptual elements. I want to come back to this one area of conflict about the size of the community center. But let me see if I can summarize here. The element of Greenbelt, beach to bay, do we have general consensus that's a good planning concept to be included in this? All right. Dual access for Finley Avenue, consensus, that's what we want. All right. Consensus that we do need to be prepared to move ahead promptly with a lot line readjustment to square off the properties. Consensus there? All right. Moving into a little bit of harder areas. We have talked in this proposal here about the need for density trade-offs for the benefit of the Marshall Properties Group and the Olin, potentially the Olin Group, for in effect playing ball with this concept of beach to bay, green belt, waterway, whatever it might be. Is council, as a matter of conceptual approach here, willing to consider density trade-offs to achieve the intent of this proposal as it relates to the green belt?
I would not define it as a density trade-off. I would define it as ensuring that they can retain their density when they give up a bit of land for public use.
Well, maybe better put, the economic value that they had before we, for example, in the Marshall property, cut it in half. I mean, generally, are we willing to consider density trade-off for those purposes?
I am, but the caveat to that, and something we should also consider as we move forward, is that I believe that it enhances the value of their properties as well to a certain degree. So as long as the trade-off is taken into account.
Not to the point of giving them an extra advantage over what they started with. The
Right.
idea here is to, in a replacement way, restore.
To compensate them adequately
Yeah.
for what they're.
Yeah. All right.
In some form, I would.
Well, I'd
agree with
like
that.
to learn a little bit more about, just what the implications are when you cut someone's property in half.
Yeah, all right. But conceptually here, we're willing to consider the idea of density trade-off to solve that issue.
To me, that's not complex. It's just the retention of their entitlements.
Okay. And then we've also talked about height trade-off. Height trade-off to achieve better view planes for the water and community gathering spaces, public spaces in the plan. Are we willing to, without being specific exactly how much and exactly where, are we willing to consider the concept of height trade-off to achieve those objectives in this planning? I see a lot of consensus there. All right. Coming back to the uses then, I see a lot of consensus about an element here of community center availability, if you will. And we did talk about programmatic. There were some programmatic examples raised here. I think zeroing in on the programmatic use of a community center element is something that we need to take the gauntlet for down the road for refined planning with a lot of public input. There'll be plenty of opportunity for that. Let's see. The issue, and I hear a lot of consensus around the idea of a residential element in this planning concept. All right.
I guess I'll register my tepid objection to that at this point, because I think it's too soon to be resolving what we're going to do at this site. I'd like to see some more study about it.
Well, you need to give me a chance to come back around to the objections that you raised.
Didn't want to let it slide.
Yeah,
So I
appreciate that,
understand
and
it.
if we can maybe backtrack one, I appreciate Councilman Hill's point about the community center, so long as it doesn't sort of detract from the revenue. I think he put it a little bit differently, but.
So what I think is the central point of contention here is this idea that we ought to have a much expanded community center, perhaps at the expense of a residential element, either partially or fully. And I'd like to see if we have some consensus surrounding that issue, just directionally.
Well, not in the way you framed that issue, I don't think, Mike, at least not for me.
you would prefer not to abandon a residential element in favor of a much expanded community center that would perhaps consolidate Marina Park's community.
I'm not sure what much expanded means, but I don't think after we reached a consensus and had a significant community planning process for Marina Park, that now is the time to decide that we're going to piecemeal take that apart and move elements of it to different parts of the city now.
Did I state the point of contention adequately here for us to consider? I mean, this is the idea. It's the push-pull between the residential and the size of the community services, and this idea that Councilman Rosansky had about consolidating community service capability into this site in a larger facility.
Well, just to address Councilman Curry's comment, you know, we looked at, we were involved in a much larger project than certainly Marina Park. We're sitting in it. And I believe we had designs, and we were going full bore ahead on a city hall on this site, which I think you even supported at the time, and still probably do. And, you know, we wound up switching gears on that and created quite a stir in town, a vote, and a significant project on the other side of town. So I understand all the planning and effort that's gone into Marina Park, and certainly, you know, we've been working on that project for 5-6 years now, maybe longer. I don't remember when the vote was, but and we're way down the road, but I don't think it's too late to rethink that in the context of what we're, I mean, at that time, City Hall was going to be here. City Hall is going to be somewhere else, and it's opened up other opportunities, and I think we should take full advantage of looking at those opportunities.
Let me see if I can state the question, and let's see if we've got nodding of heads. Or
Well,
Councilman Daigle, do you want to-
I mean, I think he's sort of dragging in another aspect of that, which is worthy of discussion. You know, how much, you know, globally community center do you want? You know, how you have one down at Marina Park, then do you really need one here? You know, so I think it is sort of a more general discussion, I think, that I would say, than just, again, my point is here, we should maximize our revenue, keep the community center there, but if all of a sudden we're going to develop this community center concept here, people don't want the housing, then that's a different discussion.
Okay. More community center, less or no housing, I guess is what we're talking about, right? Is that a fair, just shorthand way to say it?
You are, in my opinion, you are asking, would we sacrifice residential square footage to increase community center?
And consolidate other community center devotions of space into this location.
Again, this is a very limited forum here to have this discussion, but you know, the ideas I was throwing out was, yes, we may lose some revenue here, but we may gain overall savings from an operational standpoint, which would offset the revenue loss, as well as monetizing the site on 15th Street, which would also offset the potential loss of revenue here. So I understand where you're trying to go with this, Mike, but it's an oversimplification, and I don't think it's, at this point, I think it merits further investigation and discussion. I'd like to get some of those numbers personally, which I never have. And I've never asked for them, but, you know, to find out, well, what's it costing us to run a potential Marina Park Center? What's it costing us to run a center up there? Can we save money by operating a centralized center? How much money can we generate off of the 15th Street site? Could we do assisted living there and have higher per square foot revenue generation than we could here? Maybe we only have 40 senior units like Tom Billings wants to have and more community center. I mean, I think there's a lot of give and play here, and it's just too premature to make that decision.
All right, so then let me take it one step at a time then. Do we want to defer this issue for further study? Let's just take that for starters. So you're in favor of it, Nancy? You want to defer? Rush?
I think that there's a need for further study, but I would not be in favor of a major blowout public service center on this site. I think it would detract too much from the economics. I would support a well-defined, I would support a multi-purpose room that could be used for all kinds of functions that would add activity to the site that would support the restaurants and the shopping and everything else that's here. That kind of limited center I would support. But would I support consolidating all of the centers to make a major oasis for young people on this site, no.
Leslie?
Yeah, again, in the maximizing revenue, I don't see where a community center really fits with that. But his point is well taken. It probably merits further discussion, just this whole community center issue.
Keith, further discussion?
Well, we lose the momentum of all of what we've gained through this process so far. And I also think this, when we put the issue that way, we don't know what developing the alternative, the community center side of Marina Park looks like. Are we putting condominiums there? I think that's got its whole set of community opposition and community outreach issues that need to be dealt with before we even think about that as sort of an either-or alternative. But I think we've got a good process here. It's produced a much better product as a result of the community feedback. I think we ought to take that process and sort of go with it. At least it's a conceptual plan, and I think most of the elements of the concepts are there.
Ed?
Let me just pick up on something you said. I've never proposed putting condominiums on Marina Park, if that's what you were implying.
Okay, or housing, or
No, I'm not,
taking housing here.
there will be
that could go
nothing but a
there.
park there, just
Okay,
less
but it
of
is
a community center.
Right, because it is a park, and because you really
Right.
can't make that trade-off.
I'm not planning
Right.
on doing any commercialization of that property.
Well, I don't mean to disrupt the roll call, but there does seem to be 4 people in support of having further discussion on the issue.
Well, let me let Ed speak his mind here, and then we'll...
Yeah, I don't see where a community center does anything for this property, furthering the goals that we've set forth. I don't see any merit in going back and revisiting Marina Park. You just can't pull that community center out of Marina Park. You'd completely destroy the whole architectural design integrity of that project. If we want to talk about consolidating community centers in some form, do it as a separate discussion, but not in context of dealing with this site. So I'm in favor of moving ahead with the concept plans we have and just delaying community center discussions for something completely unrelated to this. It's a whole different issue.
Let me make a suggestion here. Tim, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but it seems to me we don't need to slow down the process here in terms of the discussion of this issue. If this is left until the 25th of January, if we isolate on this particular point of contention and focus again on that on the 25th, hopefully we can. That'll allow us a little more time to understand this better and give us a chance for a fuller discussion of this one item that really is a point of contention. How does that sound? Generally, though, we should be able to move forward. The critical element here is to understand the major elements and allow the people that have time constraints to move forward to solve their time constraints. I think we've accomplished that today. And so what I would propose then is that we come back on the 25th, refocus on this one issue on the 25th, see if we can arrive at a consensus on the 25th on that, as well as arriving at a view of the overall plan.
Well, the key use issue right now is that we're not going to have retail there. I mean, that's the key
Right.
issue for Duda.
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
And I think that's all we really need to decide at this point. I don't think we need to decide anything on January 25th. I think that, it's too important of a decision to rush, and it doesn't seem to be impacting the adjoining property owners and doing what they want to do. I mean, I agree, this is not we're not looking to put retail here. And so I don't, to that extent, I think the representatives said that community center or senior housing would be compatible with their project. And so, I think that's the most pressing issue that needs to be decided, and I think it has been decided.
I would caution to just blanketly use the word retail. I mean, I would like to see a definition of retail, because within an active housing element, there may well be appropriateness for a dry cleaners or something that was community serving to that housing operation. That would not be uncommon in the design of a property.
Okay, the mayor's losing control in his first meeting here. Councilwoman Gardner, let's have one more comment, and then we're going to bring this to a close.
I think it would help us in our discussion of this one aspect of, if we did know some of the costs involved in these community centers and that sort of thing, so we could evaluate that at least. And I would also add that just because it's not a public community center, there's still public use of this. This is what is important. And so even if we end up with housing, there's still a lot of public space here, which is what I think the community really wants.
So I'm going to propose that on the 25th, we come back and readdress this issue and see whether or not we can form a consensus on the 25th. And while we take action as it relates to the planning, I think there's some refinements that you've heard that you need to work on. I think you've got, do you have adequate guidance otherwise?
We do.
Okay. Staff clear? Okay. Then
Clear as mud.
it's, I think actually we've made tremendous progress today, moving the ball forward here on this whole issue. I feel very good about it. I'm certainly want to congratulate and thank the team that's worked on this. I also want to say that I'm very appreciative of the stakeholder participants' willingness to be flexible in this whole process. It's been a very good effort, as it turns out, and I'm especially appreciative of the public participation that we've had along the way. I think we've had good input. We're going to get some more input on the 25th, and we're going to, in effect, bless this for purposes of moving forward, at least as it relates to those that do need to move forward quickly. We'll achieve that on the 25th, and I think we'll be in good shape. And with that, I propose we adjourn to closed session. Oh, I'm sorry. Public comments on non-agenda items. Any? Don't see any. Then we're going to adjourn to closed session. Thank you.